what we can get into. Let's try that. All right, let's start off. So I lead off with this knight move. This is the Réti opening. We've talked about it before. I find that it's just really flexible, and it gives me an opportunity to basically white gets castled very quickly. Now, I am going to be looking at pushing. The question is, which way do I want to go? Do I want to go, which pawn do I want to push up? I'm thinking I'm going to go with the D pawn here. I'll rotate my other knight around. I can't just yet. I have to keep this defended twice. We can start by getting our bishop involved. This is a pretty common tactic as well. But yeah, so this is a variation of the Réti opening. It's not exactly the Réti opening, just because of the move order, but this is a variation that I like to play that gives me some flexibility to jump into the position pretty quickly. Okay, so my opponent now has 3 attackers, and I have 2 defenders, so I have to get a 3rd defender. And realistically, I'm probably gonna, yeah, so we're probably gonna see a capture here. All right, and so now, there's the 3rd attacker. So now there's an extra attacker on this knight, and so that's gonna force me to push my, force me to push a pawn to get an extra defender here. So there are 3 attackers, but now with this position though, there are ideas of simply removing an attacker. But if I do that, I'm removing one of my defenders. So if I remove, he can then capture, 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 and I'm down a pawn in that. So why don't we start off with just trading knights. And now we got to figure out what to do next. So we're starting to transition to a middle game. My opponent has the center, so he's got this center covered pretty well. I have open in the center, and I would like to continue my development. Now the question is, how do we want to develop the knight and the queen? So I'm going to take a moment here and just kind of keep scanning the board to see what is out there. For instance, let's say I develop the knight here. What am I putting pressure on? I'm putting pressure here and I'm putting pressure there. Not really doing much by itself, whereas if I bring the knight here, I'm pressuring these squares, maybe even rotate around if I need to. Realistically, I know that getting pressure on the d4 or the e4 square would be nice. So let's go with that route, just because I know that that's a theme of this this style of opening from white, is to try to get some pressure up here. I am threatening an exchange here, giving up my dark square bishop, which is fine. I'm okay to do that, messing up my opponent's pawn structure right in front of their king. So this is a free pawn. The question is, how free is it? What am I giving up if I grab that? Is there any tactics that I'm missing? This is an undefended piece. I think I'm okay grabbing. All right, there's no discovery down here on my rook. The queen doesn't have any infiltration. And at this point, I'm probably going to trade off this bishop for the knight. That knight is a good defender of the king side, right? So by eliminating it, I open myself up My opponent wants to grab with check. But I'm going to start here first. So I'm up a piece for a pawn. My opponent's probably going to grab, which I can then grab back with the rook. I'm thinking my opponent wanted me to capture. He captures back with check and then picks up my bishop in the process. This is obviously something I don't want to deal with. I really want to get rid of it, but the question is how? What's the best way to get rid of it? I can throw a check in. No, I can't. That's obviously covered. I really don't want to open up my king right in front of, with the queen bearing down, but it's probably the best thing to do. And then I will get a rook lift in. Everything else is defended. It's on a dark square, so the light square bishop can't infiltrate. So my opponent definitely has an attack here. There's definitely something that I have to be concerned about. But I don't know how to. Maybe I'll rotate my knight underneath. But then I really can't do anything with it. There's really not an attack on the queen that I can do. The best thing I could probably do is force a queen trade. Notice that everything else is defended. It's not really forcing a queen trade. It's asking for a queen trade. Question is, how do I take back? Probably with the rook. No, maybe the knight. Bring the knight up here onto this dark square. That's probably a good option. So let's go ahead and pre-move that. That's probably the best option, come to think of it. We'll go ahead and pre-move it just to get a couple seconds back on the clock if we get lucky. I don't want to lose on time after playing, after trying to play a good game. My opponent had a good strategy there. If I can eliminate the queens... so here is an issue, right? My opponent wants me to take, so he can then take back with a fork, which is a good strategy, my friend. Very good strategy. I don't have rook over. But now that that pawn's not there, we can come up here. Yeah, I think this will work. Everything else is defended. Yeah, we're good. So that's a very fantastic tactic by my opponent. We'll take a look at that here in the post game. But notice if I capture, my opponent captures, that pawn is forking my pieces, and I have no way to get out of that, right? Neither the knight nor the rook can take it. So that causes some concern. Now I can, though. Now I'm fine, too. I've gotten my knight out of the way. I'm attacking the queen. My opponent's still going to want to try to keep the queens on the board because they're down in material, so they want to keep it as complicated as possible. But it looks like they are... Actually, I don't want to... I want to go here so I can get this in, but I don't want to allow my opponent... Oh, I guess I'm good because this pawn is blocking the way. So I have an attack here with an attack on this rook. And then we're going to get this move in, which gives us access here. Puts us in good shape. I'm assuming my opponent, well, no, he has to do something with the bishop. Yeah, so this gives us access to capture. And now this is a double attack. This is a fork. So that's gets good material up. Now I do have to be extra careful about some things. You know, make sure I don't lose to, you know, a passed pawn or something like that. But we get the resign. So GG, well played to my opponent. I've hit a stride. I'm on a win streak that I don't know why I'm on this win streak. It just keeps going. Here's my opponent, ranked 1638. I'm currently now also ranked 1637, and I get a win. So, guys, this is... I don't know what's happening here. I don't know why I keep winning these games. This is incredible. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm trying not to take it as being cocky. I'm trying not to think that I'm better than I am, but I keep winning these games somehow. So, like I said, this is kind of the Réti opening. A true Réti opening, if you want to see, a true Réti opening is basically this. It transitions kind of into a Queen's Gambit type situation. If your opponent takes, you can simply, you know, just like you would in the Queen's Gambit lines, you've always got this pawn to push. So it works. It can transition to a Queen's Gambit line very quickly. It can transpose into almost a dozen different kinds of openings. I like it because of this light square bishop that becomes powerful. And you saw it even in this game, right there at the very end, the light square bishop is really what got us the win. We could say that my opponent going for a couple of tactics that failed, unfortunately lost them in the game. But those were some very strong tactics my opponent played. So anyway, all right, so let's keep moving on. I am ready to castle. I am going to hold off a little bit just in case my opponent starts pawn storming on the king side. I don't want to be castled and then have this wide open. However, this bishop here means that it covers a ton of ground and it can help fight that battle. It's a very, very strong defensive resource. A lot of times you'll see me move my rook out of the way so that way my opponent's bishop can't easily trade it away. So you'll see me move my rook out of the way. That way if I need to retreat my bishop, I can retreat my bishop and there's no danger of losing my rook. But in the game as it played, so here's the question, right? So here, let's turn the engine on. Let's see, what's the better move in this case? I think the way I played it was solid. I have no complaints about how I played it. Obviously getting the win helped, but this is how I study, right? This is how we get better at the game, is when we come to a decision in the game, go back and look at the ramifications of the decision I made and some of the decisions I was considering, and look to see if there were things that I missed, decisions that could have been made that I completely missed. For instance, I never even considered my opponent having this strong battery like they did. So let's take a look and see what the engine says. So the engine, the top preferred engine lines is to castle, d3, c4, and d4, all being more or less equal. But castling is the obvious best move. d3 is, yeah, d3 is kind of the move because you can get your, you can rotate your knight to d2 where it wants to be in this particular kind of system. Yeah, so it's not the end of the world d4, but it is the less common one. And you saw, as soon as I pushed d4, the entire game, the next however 15 moves came basically working on that particular square. All of the game's focused on that square. So it did drive the game, but for better or worse, I'm not sure. Looks like castling is just the best option, but let's turn that off. Yep, and now to it. And I probably, honestly, I probably should have just grabbed, right? It's not the end of the world. It's not my favorite. I'm giving up a center pawn for one of my opponent's wing pawns. And notice he's just going to capture back with development. So he gets a twofer in the process. That's kind of how the Queen's Gambit goes from the other side of the board. Like if you play a traditional Queen's Gambit, black, you know, white is ready to recapture, and black is going to hold that tempo in reserve. I'm just making up moves here real quick. White wants to develop, and then we capture, and white loses a tempo where black is keep developing. So it's kind of like that. So, you know, I could have captured, but it does give black the immediate development. Yeah, and then here the question is, do I defend? Oops, do I defend right away? Or do I go with my plan of b3? And yeah, the engine does not like my plan. It's not in love with it, I should say. It's not horrible. I mean, you can see we're basically even. Yeah, especially since I waited until now to castle. I don't know why I castled now when I did. Like, go ahead and fianchetto. Like, why would I split my time? I don't know. But yeah, my opponent is really putting pressure on this, and yeah, the engine is now ready for me to start looking at capturing. It forces my opponent to capture, and then I can push e3. But by getting my bishop developed, yes, I'm happy with the development, how it went here. It's still showing white as a tiny bit better, but not... The way I play, one pawn is not going to make a difference. So 1 point of material either way, 1 point of advantage is not a huge difference. Like, to me, these are about the same, more or less, because I'm not good enough to take advantage of these tiny little fractional benefits. The engine says, yeah, now I should just go ahead and straight up capture. And I do. I take a moment to... The idea is that I took a moment here because I didn't want this to happen. I guess following what the engine says, taking B. Yeah, I guess it's not a big deal either way. I was just worried that this tempo coming with check could catch me off guard, but it didn't. So I guess there was nothing to be worried about. You can see we're back to a very, very, very zeroed out drawish game at this point in time. We're very even in material. Yeah, getting this capture, I was definitely wanted to do that. That to me seems very helpful. I really enjoyed this capture here. So my opponent's tactic on this: capture back, captures with check, and then is able to pick up the bishop. And so my opponent ends up getting very strong development, got me to weaken my king, got rid of my bishop. We traded dark square bishops in this line. You know, in this line, we simply trade dark square bishops, and my opponent grabs 2 pawns for 1. So my opponent does go up a pawn in the process. So my opponent wins a pawn, and it's a crucial pawn, right? For nothing. So in this line, my opponent has, as you can see, about a 2-point material advantage because they have messed up my structure and picked up a free pawn in the process, whereas the line that I played, by making this trade, interesting. I'm surprised that didn't come up. But yeah, my opponent played this way. Wow. Huge difference in that slight variation. Huge difference. I'm surprised the engine is that much in favor of white at this point in time. I mean, I guess black does sacrifice a whole piece, right? 2 pieces to 1. So black sacrifices a whole piece for what? What does black get out of the sacrifice piece? So a pawn. We trade pieces. And I get a piece, he gets a pawn. So really, it's just a piece for a pawn trade. Like that's not worth it at all. Okay. So the engine puts white hugely in favor here. this is a fantastic trap by my opponent that I did not, that never occurred to me, and when he made it. But what a beautiful trap this is. Let me show you guys real quick. If I captures back, look at that fork. Look at that fork. Now it still shows that white has an advantage at this point in time. I think because probably this. It still shows white has an advantage even though the material is now back to even. You have 5 pawns versus 5 pawns. We both have a light. In fact, the material is almost exactly even, except for the fact that you look at my opponent's pawns, they are 4 islands, 3 isolated pawns, and a pair of doubled pawns, whereas white has connected structures. Probably in this case, well, I don't know. Like I said, these guys being on light squares means that they are a target for the bishop, so probably have to put them on dark squares at some point. Yeah, I don't know. But this is a positional advantage as opposed to a material advantage. But this was a clever move by my opponent to try to get back into the game. I'm glad I didn't fall for it. And it's funny how it's showing here. I can just go ahead and grab a pawn. Because, I mean, even that's defended. So, yeah, I made a less than ideal move, but when you look at the other options, but you know what? I'm happy with it. I felt like it was a really solid move. My opponent made the trade. In this case, capturing with the bishop or capturing with the rook is about equal. So I captured with the bishop, which again immediately had an attack. A solid defense by my opponent, but it leads to this particular, and then the trade, and we get a fork of our own. So we go up more material. Seeing these tactics is really, in my mind, it's showing that the puzzles that we do, because I do a lot of puzzles. You know, when I'm just sitting around, you know, watching TV or something, sitting on the couch, I'll pull up my phone and I'll do puzzles. I try to take my time on them and not just blast through them. I've done thousands of puzzles at this point over the last couple of years. And I try to take my time on them and really think through, you know, why I'm making the move, what the pattern is that I'm looking for, to try to spot some of these things. Now, puzzles are not going to be the end-all, be-all training, but they are helpful. And me spotting these tactics, if I hadn't done puzzles, I probably would not have seen this tactic. Allow my opponent to get back into the game. But yep, we the other thing, I mean, this exchange, you know, that we saw, this pattern, me taking a moment to see that if I capture back, my opponent captures with check, right? My opponent captures back with check and then picks up. Like, these are the tactics that doing the puzzles is helping me find. So our winning streak somehow continues. I think that's a 10-game winning streak at this point. I'm not entirely certain. Let's see if it'll show us. Rapid current streak 9 games. So we're on a 9-game winning streak against our toughest opponents we've ever faced. You'll notice that my previous winning streak back in 2019 to 2020, whereas now I'm at my highest rating ever, and so I'm playing against my highest rated opponents ever. So in fact, today we just hit our, we just had our winning streak. You can see this. This is the winning streak we're on right now. I would never have thought that I would be flirting with the middle of 1600s. Again, it just so happens that I'm on a little bit of a lucky winning streak. This is not indicative of how I play all the time. I'm going to keep progressing. I'm going to keep trying to get better. I'm fully prepared for the losing streak to kind of balance it out. But again, if we consider ELO to be a bell curve, I'm playing up here on the very end of my bell curve. My middle, where my actual rating is going to be in the middle of that bell curve. So probably in the middle of the 1500s is what I would say. And again, that's just Lichess's. It's not the official FIDE ELO. I have not played in any official tournaments, so I don't have an official rating. This is just Lichess's system. Everybody else's system is going to be slightly different because ELO is relative. It's you play against other people, and it goes up and down relative to the other players. So depending on how many players and how everyone starts, their rating, whatever arbitrary number they picked the first person on their list to be, everyone's going to go up and down a little bit relative to each other. So if I go play on a different website, or if I go play in a different tournament, my ELO is not going to be the same because it's relative. But on lichess.org, I am sitting currently in the low 1600s somehow. But like I said, my actual is probably going to be, if we look at where I hovered and I bounced around a lot in this mid, 1575 range, that's probably more likely. You could see even just a little while ago, I was way down here in here's low 1500s. April of 21, so just a few months ago, I was right at 1500. So I'm probably in this 1550 range, 1570 ballpark-ish on Lichess. So our win streak continues. Who knows how long it'll continue. I'm counting my blessings. I'm enjoying the process, and we'll keep going. All right, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.